talked earlier about how sometimes Allurin is one of the slower decks. It has a lot of resilience. Probably the biggest weakness in Allurin is that it's a little soft to counter magic. So against blue decks, sometimes it can be a difficult matchup to win.
Yeah, I know it's called Allurin, right? So if they counter the Allurin, is that bad?
That's good. That's good for the combo. You know, it's a good strategy to counter the Allurin. Without that, Martin usually will try to beat down with 2/1 flyers and 2/2 flyers for 3, 1/5s. It's an uphill matchup for sure.
All right, we have Jordan on the lead with Island. And Tropical Island for Martin Goldman Kirst.
All right, so Martin's going to try to use Gitaxian Probes to see if he can navigate here. Jordan's going to deny that information with a Spell Pierce.
That's pretty interesting, actually.
Yeah, so
it looks like he has an excess Spell Pierce in his hand, perhaps the incentive to go ahead and trade it off right there.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, certainly the second Spell Pierce loses some value here. Martin's going to go ahead and fetch right away. Right now, at this point, he doesn't really know what his opponent's on. It could be a number of decks. All of them are decks that are tougher matchups for him.
Yeah, when I see Basic Island Spell Pierce, I think I kind of default towards Miracles. That's like the most common deck to feature those specific cards. But it obviously could be a variety.
It could be Stoneblade even.
Yep.
And especially with that uncracked fetch land, Jordan is hiding his deck choice for the moment. So Martin fetching a second dual land, now has access to all of his colors. Well, not red, but the deck typically doesn't cast red spells. He's going to go ahead with Coiling Oracle, kind of the go-to 2-drop of the deck.
And also a big tip-off for Jordan as to what's actually going on here.
Yeah, there's really only one deck in Legacy that plays Coiling Oracle. If Jordan has done his homework, he'll now know that Martin is on Allurin.
Jordan has a Wasteland, declines to go for that, plays a Volcanic Island down instead. Looks like he's going to be planning on Vendilion clicking.
Alright, so he leaves up the mana for Vendilion click. We see here Martin just going to continue on land drops. In his hand, it looks like we do have a copy of Dreamstalker along with Intuition and Eternal Witness is the weapons he has right now. Remember, the game plan for him is going to be to resolve the Allurin. He's going to have to get it through a fair amount of counter spells. Martin does have access to 4 Force of Wills to try to protect his own Allurin. He also plays 4 Cabal Therapies in the main deck. So those are the ways he pushes the spell through.
It's going to be really important that he actually identifies what Jordan's playing in order to maximize those Cabal Therapies, obviously. The fact that Jordan's kind of playing a Rogue Brew helps him a lot in that regard. Yeah,
so he's not sure exactly what to expect for Disruption. For those of you watching, the cards he has are Vendilion Click, Snapcaster Mage, Force of Will, and Spell Pierce and Izzet Charm as his interactive spells here.
I imagine he's not going to be Cabal Therapying Izzet Charm without a heads up.
That was my thought as well. Coiling Oracle will start some beats, putting Jordan down to 19. It's pretty rare that Allurin can add up to 20 damage with just its creatures. It really is a straight combo deck in most matchups.
Yeah, I think the pressure from the creatures really functions mostly to make the opponent actually do something, giving you a little bit of a window, you know, make them spend a mana or two to handle a creature that might actually be starting to become a little threatening, and then you maybe make a maneuver.
I like the patience here of Jordan not to play the Vendilion Click during draw step. He's going to go ahead and end step the Vendilion Click, and now he'll get to know what's going on in Martin's hand.
Yeah, he did accidentally reveal a Force of Will as he cast that Vendilion Click as well, which is troubling because, as we mentioned, Martin has access to Cabal Therapy, so a free hit on Cabal Therapy is a pretty solid game. That said, Force of Will was already high on his list.
Yeah,
of
it's very
cards.
possible Force of Will would have been what he had named, but now there will be no suspense in it. In response to Vendilion Click, Martin's going to cast Intuition for 3 Cabal Therapies, which a really strong play as it puts 2 therapies in the yard. That's going to allow Martin to really clear all the counter magic out of Jordan's hand.
Yep. The tricky spot is he'll need 2 Allurins in order to make the Vendilion Click not pretty important here, but it looks like that's exactly what he has. I think he has 2 Allurins, Dreamstalker, Eternal Witness, and the Cabal Therapy he just searched for.
And those are the 4 cards he's in. Jordan's got to be a little careful here. He doesn't want to give Martin the 4th land if he can at all help it. Right now it looks like Martin still is close to having the the combo on the next turn. He has the Alluring, but he currently doesn't have a way to start the chain once he resolves Alluring. He doesn't.
Yeah. He does have a Eternal Witness to grab a fetch land, so he can actually navigate his way to the 4th land the long way,
Right.
as you like. And that's also another creature for the Cabal Therapies in the graveyard to be flashback. But considering he has Dreamstalker, he probably won't be throwing away an Eternal Witness anytime soon.
Yeah, Eternal Witness is one of those, I think, pretty high on the list for cards that Jordan's going to take with this Mendelian Click. And that's going to be the one that goes.
So now Jordan will have to fight his way through a bunch of Cabal Therapies, which, as we've seen from his hand, it's not really set up to do. He has a Spell Pierce and a Force of Will, and a Swords to Plowshares, and a Wasteland. The Wasteland can obviously help that Alluring stay off the table, and I imagine we'll see Wasteland getting cracked on one of those duels this turn.
Alright, so on his untap, Jordan has a couple options. He's going to go ahead and Swords the Coiling Oracle right now, while Martin's untapped. That Coiling Oracle represented a possible Cabal Therapy.
I like that play, but it's obviously pretty tricky against Alluring considering it's a deck filled with creatures, so each one will, inevitably threaten another Cabal Therapy.
Yeah, it just buys him time as opposed to actually stopping the therapy altogether.
Yeah.
With that said, Jordan's now going to start putting a little bit of a clock on them. The Vendilion Click will put Martin down to 16 life, and then Jordan plays the namesake of his deck. It's going to be the Standstill.
It's a really nice card to have here, as Martin's not actually threatening to kill him, and the cards he draws will help him refuel against Cabal Therapy.
Alright, so Cabal Therapy's cast. Standstill is a card, you play it when you're ahead on board and try to lock up the board because of it. The first one is going to name Force of Will from Martin, and he actually sees in Jordan's hand that's
2 Brainstorms,
pair
a
of
Geist, and a
Brainstorms.
Spell Pierce.
Yep. And so since he doesn't have another creature, Martin can't cast any more therapies at the moment, but every creature is going to represent another Cabal Therapy.
It looks like his Brainstorm may have missed land. I don't think I see another Cabal Therapy, but if he's actually Brainstorm locked himself, that's going to be a huge swing for Jordan. He can jam Geist of St. Traft this turn and be threatening lethal in pretty short order.
Yeah, it does seem that Martin has Brainstorm locked himself. That means his top 2 cards are both non-lands, so this 2-land situation is going to continue for a while here. And Jordan's going to pounce on the advantage, playing Geist of St. Traft, and now has 9 power on the board. That's a 2-turn clock. Martin with very few ways to interact. He's drawn another copy of Alluring.
He's going to have to cast the Dreamstalker defensively here, right? Yep.
Yep, remember Dreamstalker returns any permanent to its owner's hand, so he's going to cast Dreamstalker and then cast Therapy there, after replaying the Underground Sea.
Yeah, he strips the Brainstorms, leaves the Spell Pierce and the Swords to Plowshares behind.
Yeah, the question will be whether or not he uses that Therapy to take the Swords to Plowshares out of Jordan's hand. The Swords otherwise is going to get pointed at the Dreamstalker, so it's kind of...
Almost certainly.
It's the same both ways, yeah, so it's going to be Swords. That does give Martin a life point.
Sort of. Considering that the Geist was already going to get blocked by the Dreamstalker if he didn't do it.
Yeah, no, well, it gives him a life point off the Swords.
It gives him a life point off the Swords, sure, but he was, in fact, the Dreamstalker itself was giving him 2 life points, so it's actually a net positive trade for Jordan.
And off the top is another Standstill for Jordan, and he'll pass it back. We know that Martin has no more lands. This is a lethal swing he's facing down, and game 1 will go to Jordan Aisaka.
Yeah. It looked like Martin might be able to put it together there with the intuition for Cabal Therapies, but getting wastelanded off of his lands and failing to find any more after that point really just made the game easy for Jordan from there on out.
Yeah, definitely. One of the weaknesses of the Alluring deck is how much investment the engine takes. He plays Imperial Recruiters, Coiling Oracles, Dreamstalkers, Cavern Harpy, Allurins. So Allurins, a fair number of cards that actually don't do too much on their own. So when they're playing off the top of the deck, Allurins's oftentimes at a disadvantage against a deck like Blue, White, Red Landstill. Which I would say there's not a bad card in the deck.
Right. Everything pretty much just can do what it needs to do on its own. It's not relying too heavily on inherent synergies. One of the best lessons I've had actually, as far as like combo decks and spacing them, was watching the Oops All Spells deck that we saw do so well in Milwaukee. That's a deck a lot of people have talked about when Balustrade Spy and all those guys first came out. And one of the actual tricks to the deck is taking up as little room as possible with your kill condition, because you need so many spells to actually start going off. Ritualing into a Balustrade Spy from no lands is no easy feat. Charbelcher's got that Taiga to help them out. You can't afford that. So that deck has gone through so many iterations as people try and compact the combo as tiny as possible. And, you know, that's where the deck is going to derive a lot of its power. And Allurin suffers from a similar problem. It has so many pieces that you need to have. And, you know, once you start going off, obviously you can go off from a relatively small setup. But at the same time, your deck is filled with cards that aren't useful until you're killing the opponent.
All right, so let's look at the sideboard here. Obviously, this is a tough matchup for Martin. Most Force of Will matchups are a little difficult for the deck. He does have those 4 Cabal therapies to help him through the matchup, but among the things we have here in the matchup, he does have a full set of Thought Seizes as well if he really wants to go for a disruption plan. Outside of that, most of his cards are targeted for creature decks, so that's really the only weapon he gains against control.
Yeah, his sideboard actually looks like it. You would think he had Living Wish in his deck based on the look of it, but he obviously doesn't. He's boarding in a lot of 1-of Silver Bullet creatures to maximize with Imperial Recruiter. So kind of a long way to gain access to these creatures, but the Thought Seizes will almost certainly come in as he needs some way to figure out what's going on to maximize his Cabal therapies, and because if he can get rid of Jordan's counter magic, he can obviously, you know, try and resolve an Allurin and actually kill him outright.
So here's one of the dangerous parts of the matchup is Martin likely needs to board in he doesn't know it, but Fire Spouts and Go for the Throats might be something he needs to board in, as Jordan's deck on the sideboard has full 3 Meddling Mages in the matchup. Ooh. In the main deck, Martin has no way to deal. He has one way to deal with a resolved Meddling Mage, and that's a 1-of Venser Shaper Savant. So if Meddling Mage comes down naming Allurin, it's possible that Martin will get locked out of the game by it.
Yeah, that's definitely a very real danger. And while it's kind of reasonable to go into the Venser once you get the Allurin, like, Venser is not the free roll, right? You've got you can't really do a lot once the Meddling Mage is on the table. It will slow you down by a full turn.
Okay, so we also have a 1-of Wear Tear coming in out of the board. And he has 2 Surgical Extractions that you could also board in here. So there's a lot of cards that I think Jordan could be using this matchup. Surgical, I don't know if it comes in this. He doesn't actually have discards, so stripping combo pieces is probably not good enough.
His Flusterstorms are not as good as something like a Spell Pierce would be, and he already has the full amount of Spell Pierces, so no need to worry about that particular card coming in. I imagine we're going for like just the Wear Tear and the Meddling Mages, right?
Yeah, I think Wear Tear and Meddling Mages are the obvious picks here. The other cards that he can board in are probably worse than what he has in the main deck.
His main deck seems pretty skewed in his favor here, I think, actually. Even things like Is It Charm and Engineer Explosives, which aren't great in some matchups, seem pretty reasonably positioned here. An Engineer Explosive just sitting in play can actually make things kind of awkward for Martin, depending on what count it's on, as he'll have to sequence himself very carefully with stuff like Cavern Harpy and Dreamstalker.
Now, what you have to know about Allurin is that it is primarily a discard-based disruption deck as opposed to a counterspell-based disruption deck. While it does have 4 Force of Wills, its tool in this matchup is going to be its 4 Thought Seizes and 4 Cabal Therapies.
That's one of the things I like about Engineer Explosives as a weapon against it. It's something you can actually put in play, and regardless of how many Cabal Therapies he finds or how many Thought Seizes he draws, he actually has to, you know, construct a sequence that beats an in-play Engineer Explosives. You can't just ignore it.
That's what's so good about these cards like Engineer Explosives and even Meddling Mage. They're things that he can cast. They're not things he has to keep in his hand.
Right. I'm a big fan of cards like that in Legacy in general. I've been running Aetherstorm Canonist in the sideboard of pretty much any deck that has a white in it for quite some time. Just because I really like how it affects the opponent's play, and, you know, beating for 2 is no slouch either. Looks like we're about ready to go.
Yeah, about underway. So remember, with this matchup, there are interesting top 8 implications in it. With a win, Martin will make top 8. With a win, Jordan will possibly make top 8. It will depend on the result of table 4, which is 2 players at 7-1. In theory, Jordan could win and get as low anywhere. He could get 9th with a win. He could get 8th with a win. It'll be close.
Yeah. It'll really just depend on what they actually decide to do, and if their match is already finished, then we would, know the result. Perhaps they chose to just draw and coin flip themselves on Martin's fate, as Martin, of course, has himself done.
Well, it's interesting because that's not like when players do that situation. It's not both players that are coin flipping themselves on Martin's fate. It's only, there's one guy at the table who is very, very happy with the draw and ready to do it. Whichever guy was in 7th. The one in 8th is taking a larger risk when he draws.
Yeah. Yep. Depending on the distance between tiebreakers, it can be anywhere from, a very minor difference in risk to a very significant one.
And even in Jordan's situation, right behind, say he does win and table 4 doesn't draw, he could also get breaker jumped by the table behind him, which actually features one of our previous Star City Legacy Open champions, a Feline Longmore, has an outside chance of jumping into the top 8 as well.
Yeah, it's unlikely considering Jordan's tiebreaker strength, but it's a real possibility. You hang around tournaments long enough, you will see some crazy tiebreaker jumps.
All right, so both players looks like they've kept their 7. Martin's going to go ahead and lead on Verdant Catacombs, not cracking it as of yet.
So it looks like Martin's actually on 6, I think.
We will check there. Relic of Progenitus has come in for Jordan Aisaka, and that's his turn 1 play.
That's an interesting bring-in. Perhaps, he saw that intuition for Cabal Therapy, realized that's a little, kind of scary. There's an Eternal Witness as well that can actually, loop back some combo pieces. But
and you're right, Martin is on a 6-card hand here. He looks like he has boarded in Go for the Throat in the matchup in anticipation of Meddling Mage.
Oh, good call.
So
if it was Aether Stone Canonist, he'd be out of luck.
Yeah, a heads-up play by Martin. So the choice of Go for the Throat, I think, is fairly interesting. He picked that over something like Doomblade or Smother in the spot. And especially with a card like Aetherstone Canist, I suppose the idea he has Harmonic Sliver for anything that isn't artifact, so Go for the Throat hits anything that Essence Sliver does not hit.
I think maybe the idea is also he wants to be able to kill problematic black creatures, not so much that stop his combo, but also, something like Bob is a reasonable target. A lot of decks like Grixis Tempo can bring in Bobs and actually use that to fight combo.
Is there a reason to pick it over Smother, say, for a 2-mana kill spell? I'm sure there is one. Martin's
occasional utility against a Reanimator deck, for example. I don't know how relevant that actually is, but
that definitely could be something. All right, I'll give that one.
I'm sure there are reasons, perhaps.
Yeah.
Maybe he's killed some Bloodbraid Elves in his day. Cabal Therapy is coming to play. It's been named Geist of St. Traft, which Jordan's a little light on.
Yeah, Jordan has 2 Meddling Mages, a Force of Will, a Snapcaster Mage, and some lands. This is going to be a difficult hand for Martin to beat, as he did board in a Go for the Throat for Meddling Mage, but he didn't board in 2 Go, or he maybe boarded in 2 Go for the Throats, but he doesn't have them both in hand yet.
If he brought in the Fire Spout, perhaps he's got a great answer to double Meddling Mage, but we haven't seen that yet, and I don't really have a reason to expect it. I mean, he saw a Geist of St. Traft, but I feel like he doesn't want to transition into being this answers deck. He's just trying to force his combos.
Yeah, and thanks to that Relic of Progenitus, Martin is basically on a double mulligan here. Relic was able to, just by tapping, to eat the Cabal Therapy, so Martin was not going to be able to flash it back. That coupled with the fact that he missed on the first Cabal Therapy means he's now down 2 cards, and it looks like Jordan's going to go ahead and go for a Meddling Mage this turn.
Not surprised to see that.
Now, the first Mage, I have to think, is going on Alurin.
Yeah, that seems like the most likely call.
I'm not as sure what the second Meddling Mage is going to go on, so we will get confirmation as to what he's called here. Is there a case for naming something other than Alurin? I'm not sure.
Probably not. It feels like Jordan's relatively well set up to beat just about anything over long. Fire Spout.
So he did name Fire Spout.
Jordan may have done more homework than we thought.
Yeah, both these players are pretty knowledgeable of the... I am very surprised. Both players seem to know each other's sideboards very well.
These players may actually be familiar with one another, and that would kind of explain these particular sequences we've seen. Sideboard and Go for the Throat.
Martin doesn't even have red in play yet.
Yeah, the Meddling Mage on Fire Spout. Jordan... maybe he really knows Alurin, maybe he does know Martin specifically.
When you have double Meddling Mage, that is the correct name for the first Meddling Mage.
Yeah, the removal spell, yeah.
Yep, Fire Spout, and if the second one names Alurin, and then he holds back a Force of Will for the Go for the Throat, that's pretty strong. All right, he's going to play Mishra's Workshop here, or Factory, Mishra's his manland here, and then swing Meddling Mage for 2, that puts Martin down to 17. And then he will cast a second Meddling Mage. We'll check the call on this one.
Go for the Throat. Stone Master.
Just get them all.
That would obviously leave him kind of vulnerable to the actual kill in Alurin, but I would probably be more impressed.
We'd be very impressed. It would, yes, unfortunately, it would leave him very vulnerable to Alurin. And we've seen end step Intuition from Martin.
Yeah, while we wait on the heads up for that Meddling Mage, Martin will be casting Intuition.
So with these pair of meddling mages on Fire Spout and Allurin, the question is, what does Martin go for here?
Oh, he goes for Allurin.
Yeah, I think his game plan is to use that Go for the Throat in his hand to take care of the meddling mage, which has Allurin written on it, and then try to resolve Allurin. What we know here is that Jordan does have Force of Will at the ready.
Martin will need to find another blue card to turn on his own Force of Will back. Or another copy of Go for the Throat, or Cabal Therapy to clear the way. And he's not actually under a huge amount of pressure right now, so he can wait. He actually is not forced to do anything. And it looks like that's exactly what he's going to do.
Yeah, so what Meddling Mage is doing great double duty here. It provides the hate cards for Martin's combo, and it also provides pressure for Jordan.
My favorite kind of hate card.
The hate card that kills the opponent
The hate
while
card that
being
attacks
a hate
while it keeps them from killing me.
So
yes.
Your Thalias, your Aethersworn Canists, your Meddling Mages.
I love them all.
All right, 4th land to play for Jordan. We know he has a Force of Will. He has a 5th land. He also has a blue spell to pitch to the Force of Will. And he has a Relic, which he has not had to crack yet.
Yeah, the blue spell in his hand isn't a Snapcaster Mage, so...
Factory's going to join the Fire Spout Mage in attacking. Jordan leading back the Allurin Meddling Mage right now.
Interesting. Perhaps afraid of a Venser? I mean, to be fair, a Venser can dismantle that Meddling Mage reasonably effectively anyway, considering... once an Allurin's in play, the Meddling Mage is mostly useless against it, but still an interesting choice.
Yeah, I think Jordan just playing very carefully here. A 4 power on the board each turn is not that much different than 6. It's 1 fewer turn at this point, so if he wants to be cautious and swing the 4, he's not costing himself very much.
Martin has drawn a blue card in Jataxian Probe, but he is delaying on actually pulling the trigger on Go for the Throat.
So on end step, Jordan's going to go ahead and play Snapcaster Mage with no targets just to increase his clock. Now if he swings the entire team, he has a 2-turn clock. We're going to see if he chooses to do that.
Looks like he is.
Yeah, what's nice about this is he doesn't have to make it a 2-turn clock. He can swing 6 here and save that Allurin Meddling Mage until the turn where, until that lethal turn.
Jordan's hand is very strong. It's actually a Vendilion Click, a Force of Will, and a Snapcaster Mage. So he can Force of Will this Go for the Throat, and he still has access to a Vendilion Click to make Martin have, another Allurin. And he'll start with the Vendilion Click first. He wants to see what's going on. He can use that to strip the Force of Will as well, although there's some risk that there's another Force of Will drawn, and Martin draws a better card off the Force of Will.
Right, so there is a chance here that this is going to work. Martin is going to go ahead and Force of Will the Vendilion Click. And Go for the Throat is going to resolve, taking out that Meddling Mage.
All right, Jordan content to just sit on his Force of Will and maximize it, countering probably just whatever Martin does that might stop him from killing him.
Yeah, no, Martin's hand is exactly what he needs it to be. It's Allurin plus an Imperial Recruiter. That does set up the combo, but the last 2 cards in Jordan's hand are Force of Will plus blue card.
Yeah, he's going to go ahead and fetch out a land to cast the Allurin. He's going to cast it, and Force of Will plus blue card will take care of it.
And because Jordan had to fetch for that Allurin, Martin had to fetch for the Allurin, it does put him down to 6, which means he's facing lethal on the board. That cost him a turn, which would have given him 1 chance to top deck Allurin, but as it is, he looks like he's going to be dead to this attack.
Yep. There goes the Allurin, and Martin is dead to the board.
So it might be for the 2nd day in a row, Martin Goldman Kirst ends up 1 win short of top 8. We will see here just if Jordan can cinch the win. Just needs to turn his team sideways.
Keeping Mishra's Factory up in front where it belongs.
Where it belongs. Yep. Shrugs, this is going to be an activation and a swing, and that will be the game. Jordan Aisaka wins 2-0 over Martin Goldman Kirst, and now he gets to wait to see what his fate will be, whether he will be in top 8 or whether he will be in 9th.